Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. As you can see by this gentleman's face and pre-haircut, I come to find out, it is Calvin Dyson. Calvin Dyson, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, by the time this video goes out, my hair might be like, I might be at like Donald Pleasant's Blofeld sort of level of hair, which would be a relief actually. At this stage.
It's very Beatles kind of monkeys, type of look right now. Are you going to go for a different type of look now that you're getting a haircut?
Oh, no, I'll probably just stick to my same old. I've been reverting, actually. If you go back and watch some of my older videos, this is kind of my hair circa, 2010, where I look like I came second to last place in a Justin Bieber contest. That's, the level I'm at now.
It's working, man. It's so funny, because I find that the COVID-19 hairstyle, pre-haircut, sometimes is a little bit more stylish and interesting than the aftermath, but that's not why we're here. I swear, this isn't a haircut video. People are like, "What did we dial into?" The title said, "All right." So
your father-in-law is going to come into shot now. Some shears.
Loaded for a bear. Trust me. No, something. I had a thought the other day, and I needed somebody to really discuss it with, and that's why I invited Calvin on the show. And it's this. It's not even a theory. It's an idea. It's a crumb. Could potentially No Time to Die, the plot points, the way the movie rolls out, could it potentially make Spectre a better movie? Could it actually flesh out the characters of Spectre, the plot holes, the gaps? Could it be that a viewing of Spectre after No Time to Die is a more pleasurable type of experience? And we've got to start with a very simple foundation, because we need to remind people. Calvin, what did you think of Spectre?
I actually think we're on a similar page with Spectre, because I was not a big fan of it at all. And I seem to remember in your video with Joe, neither of you guys were terribly big fans of it either. But yeah, I was not terribly, excited by it. And my opinion hasn't changed that much since. How about you? How are you on it these days?
For me, Spectre is unfortunately about parts and not the whole. So there are parts that I really enjoy and like. The Mr. White scene, for example, I think is just fantastic. It's a great dialogue, some great lines. Visually speaking, there are some places in Solden that look fantastic, and they're larger than life. Some of the action, interesting. The train scene, fantastic. The fight scene, great. But to me, that last third of the movie, the last quarter of the movie, the Brofeld whole aspect, that I'm the architect of everything that's ever happened to you. Never mind. Consequences, schmonsequences. To me, there were some major gaps. What were some of the gaps that you found in Spectre?
Oh, almost everything. Which is why I think your question that you're posing in this video is actually really interesting, because I think we can talk about it on kind of two levels, because I think we're going to talk about Spectre being as a self-contained piece of entertainment on its own. Whatever comes before or after is not going to make much of a difference to how you experience it. However, on a conceptual level, like the whole, Brofeld thing, that is a conceptual point that might be improved upon. Madeline Swan's involvement in the story, that might be improved upon, and we might look back at Spectre and think, okay, well, that was kind of like the medicine we had to take so that we could get the thing that's really, brilliant afterwards. But yeah, just on a Spectre level, I'm kind of with you on it. There are the occasional specific moments here and there that I think are really nice. I honestly, I count the seconds of niceness in some moments. There's that great bit in the car chase, which I don't think is very good, with Bond in the Aston and Mr. Hinks following him, where I think the cars are approaching like a Vatican building or something like that, and the music swells and you get this great orchestral Bond theme, and I think, oh, that's such a fantastic moment. But that's the level I'm at with Spectre. It's like, Bond walking on the ledge of the roof when the Bond theme playing. It's like 10 seconds, but it's like, I like that more than I like whole of the scenes in the film.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's an hour and 15 minutes of great Bond film in Spectre. But I'm there for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So you've got to pay it forward. And you did mention something that I think is worth exploring. To me, and this is debatable, to me, Madeline as a character was very thin. Even their connection, their falling in love and everything like that. It was, okay, so I've gone through a near-death experience where, vodka martini, a dirty one at that, is smashed into my face by Hinks. Suddenly we look at each other and hey, maybe that's happened and hasn't happened to me yet. But I mean, that spontaneous combustion of love, and then this deep, deep connection where Bond is willing to throw it all away. With Vesper, I totally got it. With Madeline, I didn't. So I'm hoping No Time to Die has that opportunity to flesh that out a little bit.
I couldn't agree more. And especially with, I guess by the time Bond, we had Vesper and Craig in Casino Royale, it had been so long since we had a genuine Bond love story that it felt like something kind of special and new, and it didn't feel like it devalued Bond's relationship with Tracy, for example, in Majesties, whereas Madeline coming in Spectre not that long after Vesper, and the film itself, he picks up the tape with Vesper on it, it's reminding you of that relationship, and it wants you to think, oh, this is the same as that, and it's not. They don't have the chemistry that, and maybe the actors will do if they had scenes where they could explore that chemistry a bit better, which maybe they will in No Time to Die. But yeah, we're very much on the same page there.
So Calvin, tell me, I think I know the answer to this. In fact, I'm almost sure I do. Did you see Rise of Skywalker?
Yes, okay. I did.
So you laughed before you said yes, which is telling. To me, and this is my opinion, to me, that film was almost a Reddit of going back and looking at, the second film and maybe even the first film with J.J. Abrams and trying to make amends, trying to fix, trying to fill in the gaps, trying to appease the fan. To me, it was a failure in doing that. I almost wanted it to be its own entity or go back to some of the fun of Force Awakens or something like that. And I think because of that, it was a miss. Is there a potential for No Time to Die to be that, where they say, something, Spectre wasn't great, we've got to fill in the gaps and write around it, and it's a disconnect?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there is that potential. And I just laughed when you brought up Star Wars, because that was like my sort of my frame of reference for this kind of thing. Especially with Rise of Sky. Like, I didn't really like The Last Jedi very much either. So, and then going into Rise of Skywalker, it was like, well, is this going to improve on Last Jedi? I don't feel like either of them are that great. So that is a great example of a film that comes in to try to fill in the gaps of what people didn't like and not quite succeeding, and No Time to Die has the potential to do that. It's quite strange that we're talking about this really in relation to Bond at all. I think like this is a conversation that you would have thought you would just be having with Star Wars and stuff, and I guess going back however many years, if you didn't like a Bond film, so what? There's another one in 2-3 years time. It's fine. Just don't worry about it. It'll be a new thing. Now we are talking about these serialized storytelling aspects, which is quite new for the series, and maybe why some of us are quite apprehensive about it.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll obviously dance around spoilers, not to hit them directly on the nose. But, I will warn people, there are maybe a couple of wavering moments in the next part of the conversation, but it seems like from the evidence that we've seen, certainly they're fleshing out the Madeline Bond story, at least in part. In addition to that, it looks as though they're trying to, and they say this publicly, so I don't know if this is even a spoiler, they're trying to connect Casino Royale and maybe some of the other movies even from a love standpoint and connection. What's your feeling about doing that as opposed to having an individual adventure that just continues?
Oh, I would always rather Bond be individual adventures. I think that's why it succeeded for so long. Some recurring elements like Valentin Zukovsky coming back in a couple of films is nice, just a little thing for the fans, but you don't need to have seen GoldenEye to understand his role in The World Is Not Enough. I guess with the Craig era specifically, it's difficult because looking back with what Spectre did for the previous Bond films, like I actually quite like that they tied up the loose ends in Quantum, and they sort of said, well, Quantum was basically just a subdivision of Spectre, and they kind of wrapped that up, which was nice because it's like, oh, I actually enjoy Quantum of Solace a bit more now going in with that knowledge. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, it kind of ruined, well, not ruined Skyfall, but it, put a little negative spin on Silver's plan in that, because it was saying that Silver is somehow involved in Spectre, and then that kind of did spoil his whole scheme a bit, because it was so personal, and it felt personal between him and M, and that was like his whole motivation. And now to think that, oh, he was sort of funded by Blofeld, or just pointed in the right direction by Blofeld or something, it kind of negates the personal aspect of his whole revenge plot. So I think that's an example of how a film in the future can affect ones in the past retroactively.
Part of me as a fan wants to believe, because I agree with you, the Silva thing is such a wonderful character on his own. I don't want him to have that influence from on high, because then he just looks like, some sort of a service, individual. But I almost like to believe that the Blofeld comment about being the architect is that maybe he did fund, Silva. Maybe he didn't architect it, didn't say, hey, now go to this Japanese island, now go do this, now shoot her instead of the whiskey. Instead, it was, hey, I've had my fingers in all the pie. And I'm getting a sense that the new bad guy, Safin, may be that Silva disciple of Blofeld that maybe went rogue. Maybe kind of went off the range. We were so used to Bond going rogue. Maybe this is a bad guy that's gone rogue, motivated by emotion as well as professionalism. Who knows?
That's a really cool way to look at it, actually. I've never considered that either, the parallels with the villain going rogue, as we see Bond go rogue so often in these films. That's really interesting, actually. I mean, because obviously Spectre are coming back in the new film. We don't know, again, just going by the trailers, the information that's out there, we've seen that there are, at one point, Bond is in the middle of a bunch of Spectre agents, returning cast members. Blofeld's in jail. It does seem to be, and I'm curious to know how they're going to be used, because they can't just be there to sort of big up the new villain and say, oh, well, he's even worse than we are. Surely they're going to factor into the story in some way. And I think, what you just said is would be a really interesting way to go about it.
Yeah, and it's so again, now we're kind of dancing into, by the way, from a spoiler standpoint, you're staying away from spoilers, I assume, or
I'm not.
Or have you heard them by accident?
By accident. I mean, you know what it's like, just being on the social media. It's you can't avoid some of the stuff, but
so it seems like there is. I mean, and this is in the trailer. There seems like there's some sort of perceived betrayal of Madeline to Bond, that Bond even says, everybody has their secrets. We just haven't gotten to yours yet. And she's like, why would I betray you? Do you think that betrayal harkens back to something connected in Spectre? Do you think that the writers have tried to write some sort of connection that aligns something that happened there?
Could well be, yeah. I mean, it would certainly have more impact, I guess, if she had done something that directly affected Bond in the previous film. I don't know what that would be. If maybe she was in on the whole Blofeld thing from the start. I have no idea. It certainly looks like we're going to be having some kind of a flashback or something to her. The story that she has in Spectre about man coming to visit her and all that kind of stuff, which we all assumed was Blofeld. And I guess now it might not be. It might be the Safin character. We don't know. But I think that's interesting that they're picking up on such a just a dropped, few lines from the film and really expanding on it and making it a big part of her character. But it would be interesting if it was revealed that she'd actually betrayed Bond at some point in Spectre.
I even think, to your point, the perception of betrayal versus actual would be interesting, because think about it. Bond, at the end of Casino Royale, what worked so well, and even the end of Quantum, quite frankly, is that sting of betrayal, true betrayal, because Vesper did betray him. She was kind of forced her hand, but she did betray him, and he felt that sting, the bitch is dead. I mean, that takes a lot of anger against somebody that you know. With Madeline, it's almost, you can imagine, this is a guy that's been stung before, badly, betrayed by women. Maybe it's why he uses them as, disposable things, playthings. So all of a sudden, the Madeline thing, you could see the anger, the seething in his face in that trailer when he says, the betrayal aspect. So if they brought that back, but it's not a betrayal, it's just a perceived betrayal. So you almost have this misunderstanding for the first third of the film between Bond and Madeline that creates that. That might be an interesting fleshing out of Madeline, potentially taking what I think is a weak character in Spectre and making it slightly stronger. What do you think?
I completely agree. And to your point, the initial question that you posed, would that improve Spectre? I think it would. If that was just like part one of a story that maybe wasn't that great, but the part two kind of blew you away, and all of a sudden you could go back to Spectre, and maybe, even though it wouldn't have been intended at the time, they write these things as they go. Even with some kind of retroactive plot development, something that happened in Spectre that we now can put a different spin on and enjoy in a different way, I think that could be really effective. And she is a bit of a, it's going to sound really divisive. Yeah, there we go. But with Madeline Swan being quite a blank slate of a character, I don't know if there's much going on there. I feel like of all the women in the Craig era, and I'm including like Severin in that from Skyfall, I think she displays a lot more personality in her few moments on screen than Madeline Swan does. They have a lot of potential to do something with that, which could be really interesting.
I agree. I think they have, even if it's not a lot of film time, I think they have the potential to improve on the Blofeld Betrayal. I mean, Christoph Waltz, to me, everybody was so excited. It was the reason we got so excited about Spectre. Like, what is this great actor going to do in chewing up the scenery? And I don't know a lot of people that were overjoyed with his portrayal of Blofeld. Could they actually make good on that?
Oh, yeah. And I guess I kind of want to ask you actually, about the whole brothers thing. Do you think that could be spun in a good way? Because whenever I hear people, I never hear anyone say that they liked that plot development, but some people don't mind it. And even they will sort of admit like, well, it's not real brothers. Which kind of annoys me even more, because like either commit to the idea or don't. Like don't in this weird, they're kind of adoptive brothers, but you wouldn't be able to tell by how they're performing and acting with each other. There's no kind of resentful family chemistry going on between them. Do you think that could be, retroactively made good?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I remember Bill Koenig, and I want to give credit where credit's due. He actually coined the term brofeld, which I think is genius. And I think coming from that, what spun out was a lot of people with a lot of disdain. The whole idea of why do you have to do that? Why do you have to take on the Marvel and the Star Wars where everybody has to be related? Can't it just be a big world of non-relations? That's how they used to do it, and it worked. To me, it didn't serve the plot in any way other than actually dismissing the fact that Blofeld could be this genius character that intertwines communication with mayhem. And instead, he's a spurned child that's jealous about daddy issues. Like, to me, it just takes him down. So back to your question. I think it could raise it up about 25%. But if all of a sudden, he's talking to Blofeld in the prison, which again is in the trailer, it's not a spoiler. And Blofeld says, yes, James, I tried to, create more brothers for us, or I did this, and Safin was one of them. Safin, well, who knows? I think, to me, it has the potential for damage if he keeps bringing up the family issue, as opposed to suddenly the two of them getting back together and being frenemies, where it's like Blofeld has an enemy, Safin, Bond has an enemy, Safin. It's like the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy, but could he be a frenemy? That might be interesting.
Do you think they'll address the brother thing at all, or do you think they'll just let it slide?
I think if they do, they'll make it tongue in cheek. Like maybe when Bond walks in to see him, it's like, brother, so good to see you. Exactly. Is it my birthday or something like that? Yeah, no,
I'm totally with you there. I feel like it's going to be just addressed very quickly, and it probably will just be one of them, addresses the other one as brother for some reason, and then that's kind of it. Because that would be one of the harder developments to make work, I think, especially if Blofeld isn't going to be the main villain of this one, and you don't want to devote that much screen time to him, because, that's for Safin. Madeline, I think you could do an awful lot with that would retroactively make Spectre look better. The whole Bond and Blofeld brothers thing, I think that's probably just a completely dead concept. I don't know if you can do much with that to make that good.
Yeah, I hope they put a stake in that one. I do.
Yeah.
So question for you. There's a lot of discussion right now, and this is unfortunately just going by the trailer and alleged plot point leaks, that this is going to be a very emotional Bond. I mean, if you think of Quantum of Solace, where he's kind of like badass, brooding Bond, you know, cold killer. There's emotion there, but it's really wrapped in this assassin's persona. This one seems emotional. I mean, there looks like there's more love story. There looks like there's more connection. There's a flirting with other emotional layers. Could we potentially get something that's too emotional?
Ooh, that is a good question. Yeah. I think there is that danger. I would be, because I think the Craig era has been quite emotional anyway. Like, certainly when you look at Casino Royale and all the scenes he has with Vesper in that, and it's really well handled and well done. I guess it would depend on how it's handled. It's certainly being marketed, especially with the Billie Eilish song, which is quite a sort of somber sort of thing. It's certainly being marketed as this sort of, quite emotional, with great action in it still. But they really are focusing in the promotional material on the character drama, on the relationships, all this kind of stuff. So I'm assuming they've got a lot of confidence in those aspects of it. You know, to say that the trailers aren't all necessarily just crash bang wallop. They're really focusing in on the drama, which is unusual for Bond. So I'm guessing that they've got some confidence in it. It could end up being too much, I think. But then it depends on how Madeline's handled. I think if we can really be won over to her and really care about her like we did for Vesper, we won't mind the emotional stuff so much. How do you feel about it?
That last part, the last 7 seconds of what you said was vital to my answer, because to me, Spectre, the problem I had with Spectre was Bond's motivation throughout the entire film to connect from one scene to another and to drive the plot. I think the motivation was weak. It's like, I got to go here, to go here, to go here, to go here, set. No. To me, No Time to Die, if the emotional connection with him and Madeline and him and other people even serves the purpose of bringing him out of retirement, pushing him through the grizzle of, you know, back to the action and going at it, you know, excuse my language, balls to the wall, and, you know, a full-on assault, you know, just trying to get this guy. That's his motivation. I'm fine with that. You know, putting out that carrot for Bond, an emotional carrot, I'm fine with that, because in the past, there's been revenge motivation. Would I have liked the motivation simply to be, you know, Queen and Country? You know, he gets his orders from M, and he's like, it's my duty, it's my job, I'm going to go out and do it. I just literally, this past weekend, saw From Russia with Love. Yeah. And what I loved about, so much to love about it, the plot, the writing, what I loved about it is it's literally Connery just going on a mission, because that is his freaking job. So I think the new Craig era is always going to be woven with some sort of emotional push to get Bond off his keister. And to go and do it. So if they use it in the right way, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and I think that's been indicative of the series. Even in Brosnan, they sort of had, you know, flirtations with some more emotional, sort of, you know, emotionally driven stories. So even in GoldenEye, you have him going up against a former colleague of his, and that itself is charged with, that's not just any villain, that's like someone who you know and were friends with for a while. Right. And then Tomorrow Never Dies, they bring back a former flame with Paris. In World Is Not Enough, they have him falling in love with the villain, all that kind of stuff. So, but the Craig era has certainly sort of put a microscope over that emotional storytelling. And even Spectre is an example of a Craig film that tried to do the emotional stuff but didn't quite succeed. And it kept trying to sort of allude to Bond being driven by things in the past, even getting Judi Dench back to do that one little video as M, as a way to sort of say, like, okay, well, Bond is feeling spurned on to do this because of his emotional attachment to her, and that's why he's doing the things that he's doing. Seeing the Vesper tape, trying to make that connection, and that all just kind of fell a bit flat, because in the film itself, you weren't buying into the emotional connection that he had with Madeline. And I know that you and Joe talked about this scene, because it's a scene that really bothered me in Spectre. The whole the scene where Blofeld has the tape of Mr. White killing himself, and he's trying to get Madeline to watch it, and Bond's freaking out and stuff. And I think that was supposed to be a really big, impactful, powerful moment between Bond and Madeline, and he's like going crazy, he doesn't want to see it, and it fell completely flat.
Yes. And so what you are talking about, which I agree with, is intention versus execution. So I think the intention in Spectre was to use those emotional moments to crank the story through. But I think the execution of it was a miss. For example, throughout the relationship in Spectre with Madeline and Bond, there's all this insinuation of, why do you do what you do? Couldn't you just stop? And he's like, well, interesting. And then at the end, when he throws the gun off the bridge, to me, and I think the audience, it's so abrupt and so strange because you don't deserve it. You haven't executed that thought process of Bond going, maybe she's right. Maybe there's all these disconnects. Maybe I'm not loving this running around. Maybe I've had enough. And so therefore, toss. All of a sudden, he spares the guy's life. He walks towards her. He does an awkward throw of the gun off the bridge, which, what does that mean? Yeah. And then they're driving off into the sunset. But are they? Because he's got a company car. So to me, it's just this bouillabaisse of confusion and execution. I think in No Time to Die, they have the opportunity, and I think the writers knew this. Having Bond retired, to me, is almost repairing the ending of Spectre, because it's like, crap, we painted ourselves in a corner. The guy left, he threw the gun off the freaking bridge. Yeah. Can we make something good out of the pull out of his retirement, which needs to be something really motivating to him to come out?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the ending of Spectre, actually, because I think it's kind of a unique thing in Bond, where it's this kind of ambiguous. I still remember coming out of the cinema watching it, and people were sort of like, well, what did that mean? Is he retired? It's this kind of ambiguous dialogue between him and Q, where Q's like, I thought you'd gone, and then he was like, oh no, I came back for the car, and it's like, what does gone mean? Is he just gone on holiday? Is he retired? What? Could you imagine if that was the last Craig Bond film and that was the end of his tenure? It'd be so strange to end it that ambiguously. But and I think that's, it's why I'm kind of, I guess I am happy that Tomorrow Never Dies, No Time to Die is going to be picking up on the plot threads left behind in Spectre, because they can address that ending. And if that was just sort of left to linger and that was it, it would feel really strange. I'm glad that they are going back and they're going to try and do something with it.
Yeah, I'm glad they're going to do it. I hope it's not the core of the movie. I hope it's a string to get you back into it, to kind of finish that off, because it's interesting. As I look at Skyfall, which I think people would say, arguably, it is a successful Bond film from a plot standpoint, bad guy, etc. But the coming out of retirement for Bond and the motivation in that film, to me, was perfect Bond. Here you've got a guy that's been shot off a bridge. He's mad. He's upset. He's convalescing with a pretty woman and a Heineken. And he goes on the beach. And what draws him back? It is Queen and Country. It is, he sees MI6 exploding. And he's like, I got to do this. I feel the pull and the yearn. It's not like that in No Time to Die. Yeah,
no, that's true. And I think you're right with Skyfall. And I think it was in Skyfall, it works on two levels. He gets the call for Queen and Country. He wants to do right. He wants to do his job. But then there's also the emotional side of him wanting to prove himself. People are telling him he's out of touch. He's been shot. He's, failing the medical training, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like a perfect two-pronged thing, the emotional side and the plot of just sort of wanting to save the day.
How do you think, this is a big question.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't prepare you for this at all. How do you think No Time to Die, if it's successful and if it connects with all of us and the plot is there, how do you think it could help to fill in some of the gaps with some weaker moments in the Craig era? Because I think some people, you and I may not be in this arena, but some people do not like Quantum of Solace. They think that there's, whether it's the editing or plot points or the fact that, the big core motivation is water-based. Yeah. How do you think a good movie like this could help create a dome over the whole era of positivity?
That is a really good
It's a big question.
Yeah, no, that is huge. I guess oh God. It's tough. I don't know how much they're going to address quantum specifically. They do seem to have an awareness that, Casino Royale and Skyfall are the really successful ones that everyone loves. And Quantum of Solace and Spectre are kind of, well, okay, we'll mention them, but we won't really I guess looking at the whole films as like a 5-series arc, I guess it's like, to bring back Star Wars again, it's like the original Star Wars trilogy. It's like if those films just ended with, A New Hope, Darth Vader flies off into space, well, that was weird. That was unresolved. And maybe the Craig era will be like that. The original Star Wars trilogy, I don't think of them as being individual films. I think of them as being kind of one overall story of, comprised of 3 films. And they work like that. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I wonder if the Craig era will retroactively become that. So, we have to then judge it as like this 5-film arc as opposed to just individual installments like we're used to with Bond. Did I answer your question at all in that? I'm not sure if I did.
No, you did. Like, I almost wonder, is it going to get some sort of like better packaging around it? Because I think some people see the Craig films as individual moments, bad or good, holes, gaps, things like that. But even something like Quantum, I kind of think back to say, if this is a great film that makes us think back to those moments, the Mr. White moments, for example, in Spectre, to me, that was a nice wrap up of the character, because you had him in Quantum, you obviously had him in Casino Royale, you had him in all these types of moments. I'm wondering if No Time to Die could circle a lot of those plot points.
No, that's true, actually. And I hadn't thought about Mr. White, but you're completely right. Spectre totally made that character into something else, really, and an important character in the overall story. So, yeah, like I say, like I'm not a huge fan of Quantum of Solace, but some of the developments that have come out since that film was released have actually made me like it more, and Mr. White being one of those. I don't know, there's something weird about retroactively going back, watching a film, and kind of knowing that the story is actually going to go somewhere, whereas when it's just kind of left hanging like Quantum was until 2015 pretty much, you're just kind of like, well, I don't know what to think about this.
Yeah. I want to bring up one other point, and it's a strange one. So I don't necessarily it's gargantuan in thought, but I want to get your opinion on it. There is some discussion, especially around Spectre, that Craig's portrayal of Bond was different than in Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, that they all have some similarities, but they all have some differences. And Spectre seemed not so much that he was walking through it, but he didn't bring necessarily that edge or that purposeful, aspect, that he was just acting to the nines. And some of the things that we're seeing from No Time to Die almost seem like Craig is like, I know this is my last one. It's another chance to play this role the way I want to do it. I'm bringing it. Like I'm almost getting like Casino Royale Quantum vibes from his acting portrayal. But what are your thoughts on what you're seeing early days?
You know what? I've never thought about that, but you're completely right, and that's actually kind of blown my mind a bit. And then that would make sense in kind of like an arc perspective, because his performance as Bond has changed, and arguably that was intentional, because the whole point of Casino Royale is that he's not the James Bond that we know when it starts, and then he becomes Bond over the course of the thing. Quantum of Solace is kind of a continuation of that, and then Skyfall and Spectre, he just is James Bond. And I wonder if No Time to Die is going to be going a bit beyond that to sort of like the next phase. So Skyfall and Spectre are sort of him acting, as if he was, Pierce Brosnan or Roger Moore or something, just slipping on the shoes and, going to work and doing it. And if No Time to Die is going to go a step beyond that, I think that's really interesting, actually. I've never thought about that. But I think you're right.
I'm curious to see that. Like, you're right. What is that? There's no other way to put it than this one word, betrayal. What is his betrayal of the character, not the Madeline betrayal? I'm really curious to see that, and I'm hoping we see it in November.
Yeah.
You and I did a video almost at the same time. That was a mind-blowing, amazing thing. And what was did you give it a percentage of what you think we'll see in November?
I didn't give a percentage, but I know you gave it, you were 50-50 on it, weren't you? Yeah. And I think Joe was like 75-25.
He was.
Something like that. Yeah. So I don't know.
What do you think?
60-40.
60 in favor.
60 in favor. Yeah. I'm more leaning in favor. I think either way it's going to be, I mean, you talked about this in your video, but the release will be different to what we're used to, but I think I'm leaning more towards the side of it coming out than not.
Yeah.
Has your opinion changed much?
uh, I unfortunately I consume in my vocation so much medical data from medical sources, and I'll just say this: we need to do better. We need to do better, and if we can get our act together and things can happen, I mean, I'll go to 60-40, but but I think we just need to do better, and it's something where I'm so hoping that yours and Joe's percentages are much more correct than mine. I do not want to be right. Believe me.
I know, that's why it was kind of a hard pill to swallow hearing yours, especially like the line of work you're in. It was like, oh God, if anyone's more informed than the rest of us, it's David. And I don't know if, And
it could be that subjectively, I'm at a disadvantage because I do hear about, all the late breaking news, and I see things that, maybe don't, reach the news. But, it's just one of these things where I want to see every country, every state, every province successful in fighting this battle. And it's a battle. And there are slips because, people are human, and it could affect movies, and it will, which are relatively and proportionally not that important, but it is something I think we're all looking forward to. So we'll see what kind of pill we swallow.
Yeah, fingers crossed, eh? Yeah.
But by the way, I've got to tell you, I love what you're doing, and you and I have talked about this, but you've been spending, I would say, an inordinate amount of time, certainly proportionally to what you used to do, on really interesting videos, things like, looking at deleted scenes, video games, perspectives on, which I love these because I've never seen half of these before, specials in the 70s, 80s, and 90s on TV of like, well, that was weird. Well, that was strange. And look what they did in India. You're almost hitting the Ripley's Believe It or Not of really kind of crazy and wonderful things around Bond, and you are entertaining us all. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, David. That's really kind. And likewise as well, it's like, I mean, your output is kind of unrivaled really in terms of like how much you put out there every single week. I mean, you're like multiple videos a week in most cases. It's I don't quite know how you have the time to do it all, but it's and it's entertaining. It's like, I think it's it's refreshing and nice to see well-made content put together by people who really care about the series, because it keeps your own fandom alive and it gives you something to kind of engage with while you're waiting for the next new official thing to come out, whenever that may be. And obviously nothing much is coming out right now, so it's
going to be quiet. We have to fill, that awkward quietness in a conversation or in Bond. We've got to fill that. And I don't know about you, but a lot of my video output is purely selfish because, quite frankly, it's therapeutic. It's like, I'm going to go down and create 3 videos because my mind can't stop and I need to quiet my mind, and boom. But you probably are the same way with that.
Exactly the same, yeah, especially when it comes to like those like weird specials that you were talking about, because it's so like niche. Like I can't talk to almost anyone, non-Bond fan friend that I have about that. So it's nice to be able to make those videos and put them out and then like have conversations with people who also saw this really weird, 1980 special where Roger Moore and Maud Adams like fed elephants in India and stuff. So yeah,
it's perfect subjects. Thank you for that. I just wanted to let you know. All right, Calvin, I'm going to end it. You and I both have a job to do that we've got to get back to, but thank you so much for the conversation. This was very fun.
Yeah, thank you. And it was really thought-provoking as well. Like, I honestly, like, after this conversation, thinking about things that I never even thought about before. So that's great.
That's the mind whirring, right?
It really does. Yeah. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Calvin Dyson, you can see all his links below. And this has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.